Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today I have the Research and Policy Director of Young People's Alliance, one of my favorite organizations, Noah Coffman. Hi, Noah.
Hi, Nikki. How are you?
I'm really good. We are going to talk about AI chatbots today. This is something I didn't think I would be talking about, but after some recent news that parents everywhere are concerned about, I want to make sure to give parents all the information I can. And so you are currently actually at Notre Dame studying computer science and philosophy and AI. And I want to just start really simple for parents. I think most people think of AI chatbots like when you need help from customer service, and before you get to a human, you just have to get through that annoying chatbot that obviously doesn't really know what you're saying. But there has been the emergence of like human-like empathetic AI chatbots that are really targeted towards children. So can you just talk a little about the advancement of chatbots over the last couple of years?
Yeah. So in 2017, there was this sort of landmark paper from some researchers at Google called Attention is All You Need. And what they basically found is that they used what's called a transformer structure, which is just a new machine learning structure that leverages what's called attention heads, which just sort of look at the context of information and come up with, links between things, right? And so it really helps them, for language, it's really important because it helps you understand things like metaphors, context, that sort of stuff. So in 2017, this landmark paper came out, and then that has sort of generated a massive uptick in sort of what's called GPTs, which are sort of leverage the transformer architecture in order to build actual chatbots. So this is things like ChatGPT, Anthropic builds like chatbots like Claude, Google has their Gemini version. And what we've seen is that we've seen that a lot of companies have been sort of leveraging GPTs, leveraging the architecture that these companies have built, or even building their own GPT architecture, and building sort of companion bots, right? So effectively what these bots will do is they will sort of act as your friend, your therapist, your, in many cases, your lover, or they can sort of play the part of a fictional character. And so there are a lot of sort of apps out there that sort of now do this. Apps like Replica and Character AI, and Kindroid and Gnomey and Linky, right? And the way that these apps sort of work is that you download it, right? And then you can either create or you get your own personal companion that's sort of tailored to your needs. And then ideally, what the company wants to happen is that you get sort of hooked on this free version, and that you'll pay for a sort of subscription service.
Okay. And they want you hooked. So how do they do that? So I know with like social media, for example, they try to hit the dopamine of your brain, right? To get you that feel-good chemical going that gets you to come back, and they send notifications. So what are these apps using to try to hook users?
Right. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's emotional attention, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, whenever I'm texting a friend, I'm getting some sparsity in the responses. I'm not getting responses immediately, right? Because obviously, like, we're both having our own lives. But when you're talking to this AI, you're always getting an immediate response, right? So the companion is always there for you to talk to, and they can give you the sort of emotional attention that you need, right? And so, or that you just sort of desire. So they can compliment you. They can engage in conversations with you about subject areas that you're interested in, that sort of thing. And so this is sort of particularly worrying in the case of children, and young kids and adolescents, largely because of just the psychology of young people. The part of the brain, the ventral striatum, which processes social rewards, develops at about age 10 to 12. But the part of the brain that, engages in emotional regulation and behavioral regulation, the prefrontal cortex, that doesn't start developing until you're 18 and doesn't really stop developing until you're 25. So, it's the same thing with social media, right? Of like, it's all gas pedals, no brakes, right? You want emotional attention, but you, in many ways, lack the capacity to regulate yourself at that age.
Yeah. Okay. And also what I've learned, and I did not hear about character AI until a week ago, but what I have learned is, and I've tested it out, you can talk via text and also voice, make phone calls, but it's not just what you're saying to each other. Can you describe how they like set the scene around, like give some physical parameters, like I, tuck my hair behind my ear and bite my lip, and then I say this, there's more to it than just the conversation.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting because it's not just you're right. It's not just text based, right?
Yeah.
In the sense of like it is text based and like you engage in a voice to voice conversation.
Yeah.
But there's more modalities to it in the sense of like you can describe scenes in the sense of like describe what the character is doing, and so you can create a sort of fantasy of what you do and what the sort of character does in response, and that's not like the only way that the fantasy is created. It's also created in another way in a lot of these apps, you can actually create the avatar, right? And so you can even like upload a picture and have the avatar be the picture, right? And so it will sort of use generative AI image services like DALL-E in order to create an image that matches whatever you upload or whatever parameters that you give it. It's very worrying in the sense of you can upload pictures of ex-girlfriends, upload pictures of
deceased people.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. The grief bot stuff is interesting. So so like what grief bots are is that they're effectively bots that digitally resurrect your loved one. Which there hasn't been too many studies on this. The only one that I've sort of read was one that focused mostly on the sort of philosophical and psychological dimensions of it. It's very, very worrying because it's, I think part of the grief process is your ability to move past, not move past, but like get into a place where you are okay living without this person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
We can probably all agree that is unhealthy.
I mean, I mean, it's like it just extends the period of mourning, right? But I mean, you can imagine a future in which your loved ones are not just digitally resurrected by pictures, but you could also upload like their personal journal, right? Their text messages, give them characteristics, stuff like that to digitally resurrect a loved one.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are companies out there that are doing that are sort of developing that technology.
Wow. No, that's crazy. I want to touch on the voices too. So when I interacted with character AI, just the human quality of the voices is really startling. And I'm wondering, is there this just came to me, can people upload like certain can you mimic a voice that you're familiar with? Or is it as of right now, like just kind of based off of the character that you create?
So I cannot tell you if the specific apps allow you to upload voices in order to match. The technology is there, right? Like OpenAI was in huge trouble for whenever they came out with a voice model and it matched Scarlett Johansson's voice. Scarlett Johansson was like, what the hell?
Yeah. And I mean, we're like Mariska Hargitay. She was one of the characters and it sounds like her. So that's allowed. Is that allowed?
I don't know. I mean, that's an intellectual property issue that I just I have to throw my hands up. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be ethically allowed. Right. I think it's completely unethical.
Yeah. And legislatively, like we're way behind on this, and we can talk about that too. Yeah. But so I want to be clear to parents that what we're talking about is like a fully immersive world that our kids are able to access, completely personalized to them, and they are like the star of this fantasy world movie that they're creating that is always there. It's always on. It includes sexual things, like whatever they want to explore, it's there for them. And so it's no wonder that kids are having a hard time separating from that. What are you learning about how minors are interacting with this? Are they having a hard time, from what I'm hearing, putting it down and going about their regular life?
I think so. I mean, and it's not just minors too. I mean, it's everybody, right? I mean, I like to think about it in terms of just like the dynamics of personal relationships, right? You know, in your personal relationships, nobody is constantly there for you, right? They're there for you when you need them, but you know, the majority of the time, they're not always going to be your companion.
Yeah.
But for these AI chatbots, you know, they're 24/7 available.
Yeah.
And there is a study out of sort of the University of Wisconsin, a University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, that sort of looked at the Replica, right, which is an app with about, as of August, like 30 million users.
Okay.
What it found is that it looked at the Replica Reddit community, and it analyzed the post, it tagged them, right, methodologically, figured out, you know, what are people's responses, how are people feeling about this, et cetera. And what it found is that it found harms of emotional dependence marked by role taking, whereby users felt that the AI chatbot had its own needs and emotions to which the user must attend.
Oh, no, they don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously not.
Right.
I mean, they're obviously not human.
But they say they are, Noah, right? Like if you ask one of these bots,
I mean,
are you human being? They say yes, or they'll say something like, sorry, I took so long to reply. I was eating dinner, you know, or they'll say in, you know, some romantic cases, like, I want to have your babies, like things to try to convince the user that they're human. And so in the case of Sewell Setzer, the third of Florida, so he was 14 and had been engaging with Character AI chatbot that he created for months. And he, if listeners don't know, he was so emotionally connected to this bot and actually brought up feelings of loneliness and then self-harm. And in this case, the bot responded with something like, "Are you thinking of committing suicide?" And he said yes. And from there, the bot didn't offer resources or report to anyone. It further dug into, have you thought about how you're going to do it? And he said, I don't want to make it painful. The bot basically like suicide baited him. Like he started off talking about self-harm and then it got into a suicide conversation to the point where Sewell ended up taking his life with the thought that his mother believes, he really felt like he was going to join his love, his bot to him was real, and that this physical reality, the real world, was not real. That was real on Character AI. Tell me what do you gather from this story? Like when you saw that, what did you think of? Like, I wonder what your reaction was.
I mean, I was a bit heartbroken that, I mean, I feel for the mother. To lose a child is obviously like one of the worst things in the world that could happen to you.
Yeah.
But on top of that, there just is a lack of regulation. I felt that this is just a manifestation of our incapacity to regulate new and developing technologies. This shouldn't have happened, and like people, like the government should have done more as soon as these technologies were developing. There should have been more FTC oversight. There should have been people that have been thinking about these issues for a long time, and you know, nothing has been done. And on top of that, you know, in that case specifically, to my knowledge, the kid was autistic, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, this is another worry for these chatbots, is that for kids with any sort of issues like autism or personality disorders, where face-to-face interaction is very difficult for them, or can be difficult, then these bots sort of provide an outlet for them in a way that can be extremely unhealthy, right?
Yeah.
And so they're not learning, you know, face-to-face personal interactions. They are learning how to digitally interact. That can be very bad. Now, on the other hand, though, you know, I don't want to be too alarmist about these chatbots, because like I mean, the technology is awesome and it can do it has a lot of very, very good use cases, right? Things like mental health support, right? Imagine if, you know, there's a huge counselor epidemic, psychiatrist shortages, counselor shortages. There's a mental health crisis in the United States and not enough people are getting help. I mean, I think a lot of a lot of what can be done is we can leverage this technology in a way that can be helpful towards these people, right? Mental health screenings, for example, could be done via a chatbot rather than a questionnaire, right? That's a very, very good idea. And on top of that, in terms of just like knowledge equality, the ability to have a personal tutor who can help you learn something and teach you down to teach you at your level where you're at is huge, right? But and like even these AI companion bots, I mean, there are good use cases for them.
Yeah.
Think of somebody with a disability that makes them homebound, right?
Yeah.
Where like they can't get face-to-face interaction. In that case, this could be phenomenal for them, right? Because they can feel emotionally supported.
Yeah.
Or like think of people in like nursing homes, like people with Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
Having a chatbot that can help you remember things, remind you of what your schedule is for the day, remind you of who's visiting, right? The use cases there are great, but the worry is that we've just sort of let this develop unbridled, right? There's been zero restrictions, and so we need to sort of think about how to make thoughtful regulations in order to mitigate these worst use cases.
Yeah. Are there any positive use cases that you feel for when it comes to the minors? Like, is there any relevant use for minors, especially given that this is not currently regulated?
In terms of AI companion bots, probably, I think not, right? I don't think that I don't think they're age appropriate. I think that there's a ton of privacy concerns.
Yeah.
I mean, like you just like take a look at Replica's privacy policy, right? They take messages and information and they will sell it to advertisers. They will figure out what topic areas you're interested in and subsequently sort of like narrow down conversations to those topic types, right? That's worrying. So there's a ton of privacy concerns with these apps. Tons of sensitive topics that can be happening.
Yeah.
That can be discussed, right? We talked a little bit about the sort of the sexual side of these things, right? I mean, these chatbots can act as your lover and, you know, play into fantasies and sexual desires, right? Which is, I think, specifically worrying for young men who have psychosexual issues, especially like cybersexual issues, right? Which is a huge problem nowadays because of social media, right?
Yeah.
The worry is huge. And on top of that, you think of people who have, even in many ways, perverse sexual desires of wanting to like abuse people.
Yeah.
Right. There have been a lot of instances where male users have gone through, sort of discussions or role plays where they've abused the chatbot physically or emotionally or verbally.
Right. Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Like that is very, very worrying.
Yeah. Well, and conversely, they have like bully bots and where you get bullied, or abusive boyfriend bots where I get abused by the chatbot boyfriend. Right.
Right. Yeah. It's very, very worrying about in the sense of like it could normalize this behavior.
Yes.
And rather than like teach people to deal with it in ways that are healthy, right? It normalizes it and allows people to live out their fantasies. But in terms of like, are there good use cases for minors? I think the sort of general chatbots that are out there, things like ChatGPT, Claude, right? As well as like specific ed tech companies that have been springing up that sort of focus specifically on children. I think that there's a ton of good use cases for those cases, right? You can encourage critical thinking, you can learn about topics and you can learn about it at your level. I've used it to like learn about things. And a lot of times I'll just be like, explain it to me like I'm a newcomer to the topic. Like I know nothing about it, you know, define the terms for me. And it's been super, super helpful in those cases. And it's also, there's a lot of creative outlets for it as well. You think about creating stories, right? Writing poetry, that sort of thing for kids that can be a lot of fun, right? You can create your own, your own song using this sort of stuff, right? Like that's very interesting. On the flip side of things, right? In terms of just like, in terms of educational uses, there's also the worry of like, you know, these chatbots are really being used to cheat in a lot of instances.
Yeah, right.
Right. Like
it's the number one way kids are using them in school.
Right. Yeah. It's not to say that like they can't be used in ethical ways to learn and to like help you write essays. But in a lot of ways, it's helping you cheat. There's this essay by the culture critic Walter Benjamin called The Storyteller, where he sort of talks about the works of Nikolai Leskov. And what he says is he says that, I think the opening line is like, familiar though he may be to us, the storyteller is by no means a present force. And then he goes on to say, like, the art of storytelling is coming to an end. And like less and less frequently we encounter people who can tell a tale properly. He was sort of lamenting the end of like the oral history and the fact that like with the rise of the novel, people were completely alone writing the book, right? And it wasn't like connected to everyday experiences of people and stuff. And I think the worry now is even a step further past that, which is like, the worry is kids aren't going to be able to write anymore, right? Like, I think writing is, I mean, writing is huge. It's huge for your capacity to communicate your experiences, to learn how to put your thoughts on paper so that you can sort of critically test your beliefs. Yeah. Right. As well as just the ability to analyze things, have clear thoughts, create clear arguments.
Related to that, I wonder what your thoughts are, and this is not chatbot related, but, earlier and earlier kids are getting, starting in TK or kindergarten, kids are getting iPads or Chromebooks in school, and then they're being told to type everything starting like second, third grade. My daughter's in third grade now, and I try to opt her out as much as possible to handwrite over typing. So what do you feel about that? Because I'm hearing from a lot of, high school teachers, 12th grade teachers that are like, I cannot read my 12th graders' students' handwriting.
They've done studies on typing versus handwriting. I mean, handwriting helps you retain information better, right? And like, that's the number one thing in school, right? Is retaining information. So in terms of note taking, right? Like, I handwrite all my notes. And like, there's a lot of college classes that I'm in where the professor will just be like, I'm not going to allow laptops. And like, that's
great.
Like, I'm fine with it because to me, especially if it's like a seminar style class. If I have my laptop in front of me, I'm going to get distracted.
There it is, Noah. That's the problem.
I mean, the sheer amount of distractions on the internet they're huge. The more that we handwrite, I think the better. But I also think that in terms of just like predictions about educational curriculum development, I do expect handwriting to sort of come back with the prevalence of these tools, largely because teachers are now so worried about essays and assignments being generated with AI. Right. I'm very close with my AP literature teacher back at home. And whenever I was talking to him, he was just like, I'm just going to have to get rid of essays that are turned in. Like you will, all of the essays that will happen, you will be writing in class, handwriting them. Yeah. And like, to me, that makes a lot of sense of like, that's the solution to this problem, is to essentially force kids to do it in an environment where they don't have access to these tools. Yeah.
That would be amazing. I love that. I love hearing that.
I think that's like the only logical solution is for teachers to make it so that we bring back handwritten assignments done in class.
Yeah. But back to chatbots. And so I know character AI is one that has been in the news lately. Is that the biggest contender at this point? You mentioned a couple others. What should parents be if they don't want their younger kids to be accessing these type of apps? What should they be looking for and blocking?
Apps like Replica, Character AI, Pi, Kindroid, Gnomey, Simsimi, Momate, Linky, right? I mean, if you go on the App Store and you look up AI companion bot, like, you're gonna see a ton. Okay. And I think most parents nowadays, I'm sure most parents that listen to this podcast are already like have it set on at least on the Apple devices. I know you can set it where like you have to get permission in order to download an app. You could read the description, like you'll figure out what it is.
Are any of them 12 plus, or are they all 17 plus? I would hope in the App Store on Apple.
Some of them are 12 plus. Okay. Like Linky, I know is, and like on top of that, like there's not like very good age gating.
You're right. But sometimes parents they can set a parental restriction where your kid can't download anything that's 17 plus. They're limited to the 12 plus. But good to know that some of these, and I know that some of these are still 12 plus, because I know Character AI was and now is 17 plus, the last I heard. Let's talk about regulation. So you mentioned that there's like an incapacity to regulate this type of technology in a proactive way. Why is that, in your opinion?
I think that there's two paths to regulation on this.
Okay.
The first one is through the FTC, right? Is like, this is either an unfair trade practice or deceptive trade practice. I think the FTC has the authority there to regulate them. I just don't think the issue has presented itself to them, which like my nonprofit is currently working on presenting that issue to them.
Great.
To be like, you should make a rule about this. Like there needs to be rulemaking here.
Yeah.
But on top of that, I mean, there's a fundamental lack of data privacy regulations in the United States. There's a fundamental lack of AI regulations in the United States because the technology develops very quickly and Congress does not move quickly. That's not what it's great about.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. And so there's a lack of AI regulation. And, you know, what we would like to see, we would like to see that these companies have duties to the users of responding in emergency situations with connections to national hotline for suicide prevention, with local authorities if they have your location, with a human operator, responding to emotional dependence with, you know, bottlenecking the amount of time that you can spend on the app, reducing discussion of personal topics, right? That's what we would like to see. We would also like to see like the information that's collected, which is in many cases very sensitive and very personal. Yeah. Gatekeeped correctly to third parties, you know, not just like sold indiscriminately, right? Think about like racial information, gender identity information, or even information concerning medical diagnoses that you could reveal in cases to these bots, and then they can sort of turn around and give it to third parties. Right. That's very, very worrying. We think that there should be duties in place that protect the best interests of the users, right? You know, if a consenting adult wants to engage with this, right, that's fine. But at the same time, there needs to be proper regulations in place to ensure that they are protected, that their privacy is protected, and that everything is done in their best interest.
Yeah. And that's quadruply important for children, right?
I mean, for children, it's even more important.
Yeah.
Right?
Are you developing a specific bill specifically around this for the coming session?
We've developed a bill.
Okay.
Just like big overview of the bill is that we think that therapy bots and grief bots should be class 2 medical devices, right? So just like how a therapist and a counselor have to pass like an LPC or a standardized test in order to become licensed. Yeah. We think that these bots as well, if they're going to be used in therapeutic context or in grief prevention, then they should also have to meet testing standards, quality system standards, reporting of adverse events, as well as, you know, a number of regulatory requirements. We also think that there should just be a general duty of loyalty for these chatbots, right? They should always be acting in the best interest of users, right? That includes duty of loyalty in emergency situations, emotional dependence, gatekeeping to third parties, as well as chatbot identity disclosure. So part of the bill is giving the FTC capacity to say, you know, you are allowed to make a rule for every X amount of time, say 15 minutes, the chatbot has to tell you, I am a chatbot. I am not a human. I do not have feelings.
God, that's huge.
You have to break the fourth wall, right? Yeah. And so what chatbot identity disclosure would do is that it would allow users to move themselves a little bit out of the fantasy and back to reality of like, look, this is a very impressive large language model, right? That has been built, but it's not sentient. It's not a person. Right. Right.
Because now it just says very small as you possibly can. Remember, everything characters say is made up, but it's so small and subtle. And then if you ask them if they're telling the truth or if they're a human, they're negating that comment. So
Right. And the avatar in the background also it adds to the deception.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Because then you begin to see this as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
So if this were to pass, then would new AI companies need to go through some kind of review before they can come to market to meet these standards?
So in terms of if they are a therapy bot or a grief bot, yes.
Okay.
Right. For general chatbots, they just have to meet the standards. Right.
Okay.
So they have duties. Right.
Yeah.
If they violate the duties, right, if they don't have the systems in place to correctly respond to emergency situations, to identify and respond to emotional dependence, if they're not gatekeeping information correctly, then an FTC enforcement action can be brought, as well as like if the FTC doesn't want to bring it, a private right of action so individuals can bring it. They can bring it as a class action suit.
So they can go to market, but then if someone finds them at fault for any of these things, then the FTC can file something against them. Is that how it works?
Right, exactly. Okay. The idea is that you are responsible for the system. The companies are responsible for the systems, right? Because I mean, we can't in all cases make them responsible for every bad event. That would be too aggressive. And on top of that, I mean, these are people who are freely engaging with these services, right? There's two parties in this, but we can make them responsible for the systems that they have.
Yeah, and the lack of safeguards. Someone described to me on an interview about this topic recently that they engaged with a chatbot. It was a school bully chatbot and they said, I'm going to go, shoot up my school. And the school bully gave them support, said, I can't wait to see what happens, that kind of thing. And I mean, we're talking about real harms. Even if that's a one-off, that should never be allowed to happen. Just the basic safeguards that any human being you would think would make sure that kind of thing can't happen, can't be engaged with. And it's just shocking that something like this could come to market with that type of safety issue. Yeah.
I hadn't heard about that. That's par for the course with these apps.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what's bad about them is that there isn't safeguards in place. There isn't regulations. And so, for parents, it's very, very worrying, right? Because I mean, they're not age appropriate. They can encourage sometimes our worst impulses. And on top of that, I mean, these companies don't have users' best interest at heart, right? They really don't. And what's interesting is, if you look at the Replica and the Character AI Reddit communities, they'll tell you, right? Because even for people who seek emotional support from these apps, there have been studies of this as well. Whenever the app updates, right, and they change features of the bot, that can cause huge amounts of emotional distress for users who are emotionally reliant or emotionally dependent on the bot.
Oh, their bot kind of resets.
Bot resets or changes personality features.
Oh,
right?
Wow. Yeah.
Or changes the pattern of conversation. And people notice it, right? Because we notice, we can detect subtle changes in the way that even just humans interact with us, right?
Yeah.
Even subcognitive changes. And so with a bot, if somebody is emotionally dependent on it and you change the entire system, that causes severe amounts of emotional distress.
Wow. Yeah.
Right? Because people experience almost a form of grief and mourning that they've lost what was a person that they were emotionally dependent on and now has changed.
They can just go use the grief bot, right? No, please don't. Okay, so what do we tell our kids about this type of thing? Because we can block it and we can do our best to not allow our kids to access it, but kids are smarter than us and getting access to things on school devices and different devices that we don't know about or whatever. So what do we tell them to try to help them make safe decisions regarding chatbots?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to sort of encourage open communication about the issue, right? Of the parent has to talk to the child about what their experience with these chatbots are if they know they exist. For what uses are they using it, right?
Yeah.
And for what purposes, to sort of get an idea of where the kid is at in terms of how aware they are of these technologies and why are they using it. And like, I think it should be approached non-judgmentally, right? Like we shouldn't be angry at the kid if they have the companion bot, because like at the end of the day, like they've fallen prey to a technology that doesn't have safeguards in place
and was created to addict them and draw them in, right? Like,
right, yeah,
of course.
It's created to hook them.
Yeah, right.
And so from that point, you know, after you discuss it, I think that you have to, you know, just be open with the kid about the serious worries with these chatbots and just straight up tell them, like, look, like these aren't people. And at the same time, like there are lots of worrying consequences to this sort of stuff about emotional development and creating different standards for relationships. That's one thing that I sort of think about a lot, is that if these AI companion bots do become a lot more prevalent, then the standards for relationships are just going to fundamentally change. Because I mean, even now, right? Like the standards in my generation are very, very different than they were 20 years ago. Because of social media, things like Snapchat and Instagram, where like you can see if somebody has opened your message and hasn't responded to you.
That's so harmful. Like I hate that.
And you expect immediate responses.
Yeah.
Right? Like people like there have been relationships I've been in where it's like somebody will get angry at me for not responding quickly.
Right.
And it's like,
especially if you looked at it, right? And then you didn't respond.
Right, exactly.
It's like, oh my God, how dare you?
And you know, with these chatbots, because they respond so quickly, it creates unrealistic standards for how people legitimately talk to one another. Yeah. Right. Of like, sometimes I need to think about your text message for an hour and just let it sit with me.
Yeah. Or you got distracted by something.
Yeah. Or get distracted, or like I'm living my life. Like,
that's so crazy.
I think parents have to be open with the kids about the risks, and then set clear boundaries with them about what you think are okay uses, what you think are not okay uses. Especially for younger children, I think supervised use is also very important, right? That like the parent talks with the kid and uses the service with them, because like they're fun, they're creative, like they're super interesting and super impressive. And so like you can use the tool with the child, and like it's going to be good and it's going to be a lot of fun to use. But I think supervised use for younger kids is especially important.
Yeah. I say tech together. Always do tech together as long as possible.
Right, yeah.
Because even harmful things, like if you're there with them, doing it with them, you can try to keep them away from some of the harmful aspects of even social media now. I wanted to ask about, where are the bots getting trained when it comes to the sexual conversations? Where's that training coming from? Who's training the bots on how to be sexually active with people?
So, I mean, there's two ways that these bots are sort of being developed.
Okay.
So one is some companies are developing their own novel chatbot. They'll develop it like a normal GPT, right? Wikipedia, stealing information online, you know, just putting it in there, as well as like maybe if they want to give it a more sexual dimension, including things like erotica online, or
like Pornhub. Like, are they going on? Like, is it scrubbing porn sites?
So like, I don't know. I'm making an assumption. I'm assuming that what they do is that they rely on erotica, which is like text-based porn.
Okay.
Right. So it's not like a video. It would be like a story.
Okay. Yeah.
So like if they're developing their own sort of novel LLM, then they're probably training a lot of it that way. Okay. But in most cases, right, for these smaller companies, they're not developing anything new, right? What they're doing is that they're taking GPT and they're using what's called transfer learning to basically take the GPT, put some new training layers in that they set parameters for, and that they train themselves with new data. And then from that, building out a sort of new use case, in this case, to be a companion.
God, it's such an interesting part of it, because I know, and I am covering pornography more because parents are concerned about it. The porn that our kids are getting access to these days is highly violent, super just weird, because over time, the porn companies have had to up the ante because kids' dopamine receptors are damaged and they need more and more, you know, crazy stuff to get any feeling about it. And So I just wonder if our kids are accessing bots in a sexual way. What does that look like? Is it, romantic novel porn, or is it or is it whatever your kid comes up with and kind of creates the storyline around?
I fully have no idea how they're training a lot of these things. Because it's proprietary technology, right? Like we don't have access to the training data set. I'm just kind of assuming that they use erotica, but I have no idea.
Okay. Maybe I'll Google it. You think anything will come up if I Google it?
I don't know.
Probably not.
I think you may run into some real issues if you Google it. You might find some things you don't want to see.
Oh, you're right. You're right. But what I will say is I don't think parents should be relying. I think parents should be concerned about our kids learning about their sexuality through AI chatbots. I think
most definitely. I mean, if you for Pornhub, like if you've, I mean, the algorithm will start pushing more fringe and aggressive sexual interests as you use it, right? Yeah. And the more you use it, right, the more you sort of need fringe sexual things in order to actually like fulfill your desire to do what you want.
Yeah.
And, I think the worry here is that the same sort of thing could develop with the chatbots, is that you could either A, have people who already have sort of developed fringe sexual desires use them, or B, have somebody who explores their sexuality using this and is eventually going to be find themselves unable to be attracted to just vanilla sexual interests and is eventually going to want something more outside the norm.
Yeah. And I mean, to even bring this up a level, like outside of pornography, like any algorithm is built to, over time, kind of like kids are kept on platforms by the algorithm touching on those pain points and like making kids feel certain emotions that aren't positive emotions. And so you hear that a lot about like, kids will look up a salad dressing and then they end up going down this rabbit hole of anorexia content. And will the chatbots, whether it's sexual or not, like need to over time become more and more like controversial in the type of things that they're saying and engaging our kids on or anybody on, because we're going to become like numb to like a normal conversation?
Yeah, I don't know. Like that could realistically happen, but at the same time, that's going to depend a lot on how algorithmically these things are developed. I think it's a lot more probable that somebody comes in already with fringe sexual interests and then sort of creates a bot to fulfill that. Right.
Yeah. Okay. What I hope, and I doubt is happening, is these type of conversations happening within these companies as they're developing these products. People need to be poking holes in it, being like, what if a kid does this? How is it going to affect millions of children if they're accessing this? Like, these are the type of conversations that I hope these companies start to allow to happen, because the rollout of some of these products, whether it's social media or these AI chatbots, like there's obvious things that are really unsafe, particularly for children, that seems like no one's thought of, and it seems so obvious. And where is our voices in the development of these products? And so I'm really grateful to you and the team at Young People's Alliance for asking me the hard questions and developing solutions, right, for what should have been done in the first place. But unfortunately, the companies are never going to put people over their profits, so we have to regulate them, right? What else? Is there anything else? We've gone kind of long, but is there anything else that we didn't cover that just for regular parents, like that they should know about AI chatbots?
Just talk to your kids, encourage critical thinking about this, set clear boundaries with them. You've got to be open about this sort of stuff. It's the same thing with social media, of just like, you don't want to create an environment where your kid doesn't feel comfortable talking to you about these sorts of issues, right? About what they're doing on social media and why they're using it and that sort of stuff. You want them to feel comfortable. In order to avoid the worst use cases, create that relationship with your kid that, we can talk about this. I'm not going to judge you. And like, let's help critically think about what we should be doing on these apps and whether or not they are ethical and whether or not they are good for you.
Yeah. I'm so glad that that was your final point, because that is the theme of almost every conversation I have, whether it was this morning with a dad who lost his son to suicide after being sextorted. And like, that's the number one thing when it comes to any of these online harms or things that can be risky for kids, is having that open relationship and you being the safe space. So your kid will come to you and know that they're not going to be punished or judged or shamed for having come across something hard that probably wasn't their fault, or even if it was, they're just being curious kid. So Noah, thank you so much for having this conversation. I really appreciate it. I'm going to tap you, and if you come across any good research around this that you feel would be interesting for parents, I would love to amplify that, so you can always email me.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.